I want to tell you about one of the most terrifying and violent American cults, a cult known as the Ku Klux Klan, or KKK, an extremist group that for years did whatever they wanted in America, causing such horrific events that it's hard to believe they happened in the US and just a few decades ago. The origins of the Ku Klux Klan date back to the 19th century in 1865. Before anything else, let's see why this group was formed and what goals its founders were pursuing. The story goes back to the American Civil War and the controversial law abolishing slavery in the country. After Abraham Lincoln became President of the United States in 1860, he banned slavery after years of debate and tension between supporters and opponents. However, the Southern states, governed by Democrats and much more extreme than the North, opposed this law. Using this as an excuse, 11 Southern states united with the aim of independence and separation from the federal government, declaring that they would no longer follow the central authority. As a result, a union of northern states was formed under the leadership of the federal government, which ultimately ended with the defeat of the South. After their defeat, most white Southerners, who had already treated black people poorly, grew even angrier and more hateful toward them. Now not only were 4 million black slaves freed by government orders, but they were also granted the right to vote, something the former white masters could not tolerate. The slaves had been their unpaid labor force on farms and plantations, and their emancipation dealt a major blow to the financial interests of the landowners. Moreover, it was unacceptable to these white masters that black people could have the same voting rights and social status as themselves. All these issues led some defeated Southern military forces to form the Ku Klux Klan, a group created to fight against the abolition of slavery and the freedom of black people. The name Ku Klux Klan comes from a combination of the Greek word kaiklos, meaning circle, and the English word clan, meaning tribe or group. Over time, the term Ku Klux Klan came to represent a brotherhood of white supremacists. The group's first meeting was held on December 24, 1865, in the town of Pulaski, Tennessee, and very soon many individuals joined this extremist group. In the early days, the group's activities were mainly about intimidating and threatening black people. However, over time, they turned to violence. They used every opportunity to humiliate and assault black individuals. They looted their property, destroyed their homes, and even killed black people over the smallest disputes. Another mission the Klan members pursued with great precision and motivation was to intimidate and terrify the people of the South into voting for Democratic Party politicians. At that time, some Democratic representatives still supported slavery. As a result, due to fear of Klan threats, Democrats gained power in many Southern states, and although only a few months had passed since the Civil War, new laws against black people were enacted in these states. All this happened even though between 600,000 and 850,000 people had died during the Civil War to eliminate racism. It seemed that the shadow of prejudice and discrimination was not going to be lifted so easily. The Ku Klux Klan continued its violent actions against black people until 1870, killing hundreds during that time, and surprisingly, they had many supporters among white people. The violence persisted until Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th President of the United States, decided to crack down harshly on them and stop their murders and destruction. Finally, in 1871, under government pressure, the group's activities were halted, and black people could live with somewhat less fear toward the end of the 19th century. However, this relative calm did not last long. In 1915, supporters of racism gathered again and revived the Ku Klux Klan. This time, they had better conditions, both in terms of membership numbers and financial and promotional resources. At the same time as the re-establishment of the organization, a movie called The Birth of a Nation was released in American cinemas, playing a major role in spreading their extremist ideas among ordinary people. The story of the film portrayed a group of white Southerners who, by forming the Ku Klux Klan, rose against corrupt black people and, after defeating them, restored peace and justice in the South. Moreover, this second generation of the Klan not only opposed black people, but also harbored hatred against Jews, Catholics, communists, homosexuals, and even supporters of Darwin's theory of evolution. They introduced themselves as the guardians of moral values and followers of Protestantism. The 1920s marked the peak of the Ku Klux Klan's influence. Before the start of World War II, they had gained considerable popularity among white Americans. Even for a decade, many politicians and government officials were either Klan supporters or formal members. According to a report from 1924, out of every 1,000 members of the Democratic Party, 343 were either members or supporters of the Ku Klux Klan. The group's terrorist activities escalated to such a degree that, by the 1950s and 1960s, they even resorted to bombings, including the bombing of a church. This new generation of the Klan, much like the first, would hold a special ritual before carrying out an assassination. The night before a targeted killing, the group members would gather together, wear long white robes resembling burial shrouds, place pointed white hats on their heads, and cover their faces with special white masks to avoid identification. Then they would circle around a very tall wooden cross, set it on fire, and while watching it burn, they would sing religious hymns. The day after these ceremonies, the bodies of several black individuals would often be found in different parts of the area. Gradually, they began executing their victims in front of large crowds of spectators. This type of killing became known as lynching. Lynching means the unlawful and unofficial execution of an individual by people without a legal trial in court. It was carried out in different ways. Sometimes the victim was hanged, and other times their body was covered with tar and they were killed alive. What is strange and horrifying is that professional photographers attended these lynchings, capturing images of the painful torture and death of black victims. Sometimes, spectators would even take souvenir photos with the charred bodies of the lynched victims and send them to their friends and acquaintances. Gradually, these photos turned into postcards, and the public's high demand for them turned their sale into a highly profitable business that continued for years. Eventually, the head of the U.S. Postal Service officially banned the mailing of these gruesome images. As the brutality of this group intensified, civil rights activists and human rights advocates made great efforts to stop the violence. Respected newspapers and magazines in the southern states began publishing articles daily condemning the Ku Klux Klan. Protestant churches also declared that the Klan's actions were completely against the teachings of Christ. As opposition increased, the FBI, the federal police of the United States, also took action, beginning the arrest and suppression of the Ku Klux Klan members. J. Edgar Hoover, the first director of the FBI, fought against this group and its dangerous members throughout his long tenure. Finally, due to the efforts of law enforcement and civil rights activists, the organized structure of the Klan collapsed once again, although their acts of sabotage continued for years afterward. Since the 1980s, due to the cultural progress of American society, the growth of civil rights activities, government crackdowns, and a lack of public support, the number of followers of this sinister group has steadily decreased. Racist ideologies and supporters of such groups still exist in American society today. However, At least there is no longer any news of those atrocities and massacres, and no one can stage those brutal displays of torture and murder for eager spectators anymore. During the 2016 election, the voices of this group's supporters were heard again as they endorsed Trump, claiming that he thinks like us. In fact, during the election period, some of them gathered in Trump's favor and held cross-burning ceremonies. The historical route of cross-burning dates back to the 14th century in Scotland. At that time, whenever the Scots wanted to declare war, they would burn a cross to officially announce that their decision to start the battle was final. Later, during the Ku Klux Klan era, burning crosses was used to intimidate black people, Jews, and anyone who opposed them. Later on, when the Civil Rights Act and anti-discrimination laws were passed and enforced in America, this terrifying group would burn crosses wherever they wanted to protest against human rights groups and the new laws. For example, if a black person bought a house in a white neighborhood, they would go to their yard and burn a cross to protest their arrival and to intimidate them into leaving the neighborhood. The cross burning during Trump's election campaign also meant that they were willing to do anything to help Trump come to power. They believed Trump was one of them, although that was their claim, and Trump himself made no comment regarding this issue.